Hey everyone! Last week I kind of showed off my new acquisition of the Love deck and the Shadow deck from the Neo Rider Tarot collection, and kind of just, gave my general thoughts about them and how much I liked them. At the end of the video I did mention that I had not bought the other two decks in this collection, the Antique deck and the Royal deck, because for the most part I had gotten these two decks specifically because of the way they were printed on the plastic with this cool metallic texture. I thought that that was really unique, not something that I'd seen before in an RWS deck, and I wanted to see how that came out in person. I also mentioned that the four decks in this collection are basically different iterations of three basic themes. You have line work, you have color work, and you have the metallic texture. When you have a deck that is just line work and metallic texture, you have the Love deck. When you have a deck that is the color work and the metallic texture, you have the Shadow deck. If you just had the line work, that was going to be the Antique deck, and if you had just the color work, that was going to be the Royal deck. I really liked how these two decks came out, so at the end of that video last week I did say that I was going to keep an eye out for used copies of the Antique deck and the Royal deck and see if I could add them to my collection. I thought that maybe, getting previously owned decks would be a little bit faster than waiting a couple months for shipping from China during a global pandemic. And I was right! About 15 minutes after I said that and started uploading my videos, I basically, went on to a couple tarot groups on Facebook, and sure enough, someone had copies that they were getting rid of, and like 3 days later they were at my house. So that really beat waiting 2 months from China for sure. Oh my god. So that's great. So now I've got these decks. I haven't actually opened them up and taken a look through them yet. I thought we could do that together. So yeah, I now have the Antique deck and the Royal deck, so yay! I do have to say that the lady who sold them to me was absolutely wonderful and adorable and all things fantastic, but she didn't do the greatest job of packaging these decks up to me. She basically threw one layer of bubble wrap around them and tossed them into a box, and that box got crunched by the United States Postal Service. And these did get damaged. I think you can see here how these corners are kind of crunched in here. All right. I've noticed some separation of the box. Like you can see here how this is ripped now. And the opposite corner is ripped actually here. That's ripped really bad. So I'm not thrilled about that, but these two decks were more cost effective than they were buying them brand new, and I got them a hell of a lot faster. So yeah, let's start by looking at the Antique deck. This is the deck that I was not enthused about when I saw it in pictures, because to me it just looked a little bit boring. But let's take a look at it in person. I do like black. Ooh, sorry, I got distracted by that edging. That is pretty. I love this. It's a soft gold. That is just, oh, that's just so lovely. That's everything that I would want gold edging to be, actually. Can I have this on all my decks? Sorry. I do like a black and white deck. I think that there's something just very simple about seeing Pamela Coleman Smith's original work here. I don't believe she colored the cards. Or if she did, that was something after the fact to kind of get something set up for a publisher to kind of work off of. But the original things that she did were the black and white line work. And I have to admit, these definitely show that the vectorization process they went through to create this deck did take out some detail. Let me actually just grab here we go. Okay. So here is a black and white card. This depicts the Fool as it was originally shown off in a 1909 issue of the Occult Review. That was Ralph Shirley's journal, I guess, for all things occult, and he was the editor, I guess the editor-in-chief of Writer Books, the publishing company that put out this deck. When we kind of take a look at these two side by side, you can see how there's a lot more detail in this card. Like, take a look at that Fool's face. All right. We can make out his eyebrow. We can make out a little glint in his eye. In the 1909 one, you can see his mouth is actually open. All of that just kind of gets erased with the antique deck. But it's actually not antique, right? With the antique deck, you can barely even make out his nose. The feather here becomes mostly black when you can really here see that it should be quite open. They have taken out a lot of the speckles in his tunic, which just kind of makes it feel very heavy and black blob-like. Yeah, so I do think that the vectorization, while it is sharp and very clear, it has just kind of averaged out some of the fine detail, which is what vectorization does. I don't know why I'm surprised. You can compensate for that when you're doing vectorization by going in and manually correcting things, kind of like moving around the little points. But that is a very tedious process, and I would have been shocked actually if someone had done that. But yeah, like, it just feels more heavy and sodden, and when you don't have that metallic effect of the Love deck to kind of distract you from that, I think that the overall effect is just not nearly as nice. Let me just grab these fools here. Right, like, I've got more stuff happening with this deck, so I'm not focused on that line work, but here there's nothing to distract me from the line work. So it's not great. But it is definitely a workable deck. Looking at some of these other cards, I mean, it's fine. There are some things with the vectorization that I find super questionable, like we are now missing a pupil in the Emperor's eye. The Hierophant now looks like he has cat eyes, right? So there are some a little odd things that happen here and there. But the images are recognizable, the line work is sharp, it's crisp. The printing on this is really lovely. My quibbles with the artwork aside, I love the way this company has produced these decks. When I'm kind of playing with this deck, I can feel a texture across this. The card itself is that skin texture, the rose petal texture, and then the line work is laid on as kind of like almost screen printing on top of it. So it's very slightly raised, and it just feels really cool. I'm not a huge fan of that rose petal / skin texture in general. To me, like, it makes cards feel a little bit too grippy. However, if you did have dexterity issues, that would definitely be a positive, because these cards, you can shuffle them and they won't go anywhere. I can guarantee that. That being said, on this deck, I'm not a huge fan of the rose petal / skin texture, and that's because of this parchment color. Like, this kind of looks like leather or skin in itself, when you put that texture on top of it. When I hold this deck, I am hearing like Hannibal Lecter whisper in my voice, in my head. It's a little creepy. It feels like skin. It looks like skin. Like, that's kind of gross. So yeah, I am noticing here that on some of these black cards, oh, I thought that this was maybe like fingerprints. I guess it isn't. There is like, I can see some texture differences, so maybe this ink didn't lay down the best. In light, I can kind of see how it looked like there was like fingerprints on it, but I guess that isn't fingerprints because, again, yeah, it's not leaving a fingerprint for me, so there are some issues there. Very small quibbles though. It is a nice deck. It just probably isn't a deck for me. Because I will definitely be distracted by the vectorization issues, and the skin texture is super creepy. But that was my experience with the antique deck. First impressions. Yeah, I love that edging though. Man, that is glorious. So pretty. All right, so I guess let's pull out the royal deck here. Oh, this one doesn't even have the band taken off. Ooh, this is a different gold entirely. Let's pull. So this is the antique, and I just love how nice and pretty that is. And the royal deck is blingy, very shiny, mirror-like gold, as opposed to this like dusty matte gold. Still very pretty. I wish all my decks could be edged in gold. All right. Oh, dear me. What is happening with this color? Oh. Mm. Well, if you are not a person who likes bright yellows or bright blues, this is probably going to be a deck that will interest you. My initial impressions of the coloring aren't fantastic. All right, so here's why I'm like, ugh, I don't know what's going on here. Let me see. All right. Here, hang on. This is a Rider Tarot Yellow box that hasn't even been taken out of the shrink wrap. And this is the type of card that we're pretty used to seeing, right? So when we put the Neo Rider Royal deck next to it, you can see that they've really knocked down brightness in tone quite a lot, with possibly the exception of the red, right? All the yellows have been made way more mustard, almost brown. A lot of blues have been made so deep that they're essentially purple. I honestly can't. Where's a good purple card? Yeah, so the chariot canopy and everything should be a blue, and to me this is very much reading as purple. There's an actual like purple that should be purple, so I guess maybe this is a little bit more red toned, maybe, but that is so blue it's purple. So yeah, there's a lot of color differences that I'm not entirely keen on, and here's why. When you darken some of these colors, the cards start feeling very leaden and heavy to me. They are dramatic, they are impactful, they are cool, but they are heavy. And they've got such a bright white in here that just kind of like pops so much. Like, you know that it's very high contrast. And I kind of find it a little hard to look at. Right. So that's that. I don't think that it was such an issue with the shadow deck. Let me pop out the shadow deck here. Oh, I didn't put this back in order after I shuffled it, did I? Nope. Well, fudge. But we can at least look at the magicians here. All right. When you put the metallic over this color file, because the color files are exactly the same, you're now bringing light into the card. The metallics take the light and they will bounce it back at you, right? So it brings a life into this. And you would need darker colors to compensate for that. If I had, you know, the canary yellow of the yellow box with the metallic on top of it, it would be too hard to look at. That would burn your retinas, right? So you would need some darker tones when you're putting the metallic on top of it. But to have them just by themselves, like, the card looks fine, it really does, but it also looks off, and it looks heavy, and it looks dark. Like, that's just odd. I can definitely also tell that they have minimized the amount of color tones throughout this, which totally makes sense. If you, like, this was probably made to have this metallic over effect put on it, and you can't have crazy textures and a myriad of colors, right? That will just make a very busy deck. So this is probably, you know, a color reduction because someone was going to put, you know, metallic over it. And if you like something a little bit more simple, I guess it can work. But to me, it just looks like a missed opportunity to do something really cool with a vectorized deck. Let's take a moment to grab actually the Knight of Cups. Okay. With some art, oftentimes people forget to color in this little bit here in the horse, but they've taken care of that. That's what I wanted to look at real quick. So it does look like someone did bother to really take some time to make sure things were colored decently and that there weren't any like glaring issues with the colorization, but minimizing the colors and deepening the colors I don't think did this deck tons of favors. It is not my favorite RWS coloration, that's for sure. Am I glad that I found copies of the antique deck and the royal deck? Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that I got to see them. I'm glad that I got to experience them. I'm not convinced that I'm going to keep them forever and ever and ever and cherish them until my dying day. But it is nice to, you know, have a complete collection of a writer deck, since apparently that's my bag. So I guess I'm not sorry that I got these decks after all. All right. Thank you so much for hearing me ramble on about these two decks, and I hope that it was at least illuminating for you in some capacity. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.